When are you going to swear in Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva?
As soon as we get back to legislative session, when Chuck Schumer allows us to turn the lights back on.
Why haven't you done it already?
Because this is the way the institution works. I'm following the Pelosi precedent, by the way, when my dear friend from Louisiana, Julia Letlow, was elected to fill the seat of her deceased husband because of COVID. Nancy Pelosi took 25 days to swear her in. By the way,
are you saying, let me stop you. Are you saying that Nancy Pelosi refused to swear her in earlier?
No, I'm saying that's my very point. Is this is the normal
my
process.
understanding is that was the date that actually the representative-elect Letlow at the time requested.
Señores, pánico total en los Estados Unidos. Donald Trump lo sufre mientras que Mike Johnson no supo responder y terminó cayendo en la trampa. Yo sé que muchos vieron este fin de semana las protestas No Kings, este evento masivo en Estados Unidos, pero muchos al parecer no vieron a MAGA Mike Johnson en vivo, literalmente en pánico. No tenía ni la menor idea de cómo decir ni cómo justificar el desastre que tanto él como Trump y todo el movimiento MAGA están provocando con este cierre de gobierno. Y claro, la gente los está culpando, con toda la razón. Seamos honestos, Donald Trump controla todos los poderes. Mientras tanto, ¿qué es lo que hace? Quitarle el seguro médico a 20 millones de estadounidenses. Pero claro, mágicamente puede regalar 40.000 millones de dólares a Argentina. Así es, así de coherente es este gobierno. Lo mejor de todo es que incluso el propio encuestador de Trump, que es Tony Fabricio, admitió que el 73% de los estadounidenses quieren que se mantengan los subsidios del Obamacare. O sea que el país entero está rechazando lo que está haciendo Donald Trump. Bueno, pues amigos, MAGA Mike Johnson trató de defender lo indefendible. Últimamente anda saliendo en programas de fin de semana, al igual que lo hizo este fin de semana, intentando convencer a la gente de que el Partido Republicano es el partido de la salud. Encima que sale presumiendo que ayudó a los hospitales rurales, cuando en realidad lo que hizo es quitarle 200.000 millones de dólares y solo devolvió 50.000. O sea que si robas $1,000 y devuelves 200, ¿te aplaudimos? No, señores, la gente no es tonta. Miren cómo entró en pánico en televisión, pues este es MAGA Mike en su esplendor.
The Democrats did not vote for the clean funding bill. They have chosen to shut the government down, to fight for the health care and the other items you mentioned. But let me ask you, why, as this is going on, why is the House not in session?
Well, first of all, we're fighting for health care as well, not just in word, but in deed. We put it in the one big beautiful bill, the Working Families Tax Cut, real reforms to Medicaid to make it work better, to preserve the program, because we had illegal aliens receiving benefits. We had young able-bodied men who were not working. They don't have dependents. They were riding the wagon. We cleaned that up in our bill. In their counterproposal, what Chuck Schumer is arguing for is he wants to reverse those reforms, which would be a terrible policy.
A partir de ese momento la cosa se pone picante porque luego le preguntan sobre la famosa Adelita Grijalva. Hablamos de esta congresista electa de Arizona. Le dicen, ¿por qué simplemente no la juramentas, Mike? Tú puedes hacerlo. Y claro, él no la deja entrar al Congreso porque recordemos que ella es la firma número 218 para la petición de los archivos de Epstein, para que todo pueda salir a la luz. Y bueno, desde ese momento empieza a mentir descaradamente. Él afirma que está siguiendo el precedente de Nancy Pelosi. Pero ojo que el propio conductor le responde, eso no es cierto. Pelosi nunca impidió que alguien jurara. Y bueno, pues MAGA Mike empieza a improvisar y a inventarse cosas. Vean esto.
When are you going to swear in Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva?
As soon as we get back to legislative session, when Chuck Schumer allows us to turn the lights back on.
Why haven't you done it already?
Because this is the way the institution works. I'm following the Pelosi precedent, by the way, when my dear friend from Louisiana, Julia Letlow, was elected to fill the seat of her deceased husband because of COVID. Nancy Pelosi took 25 days to swear her in. By the way,
are you saying, let me stop you. Are you saying that Nancy Pelosi refused to swear her in earlier?
No, I'm saying that's my very point. Is this is the normal process.
My understanding is that was the date that actually the representative-elect Letlow at the time requested. She had obviously her.
Okay, here's some more examples. Okay.
No, but wait a minute. You mentioned the Pelosi precedent, but Pelosi didn't delay that.
Let me give you more than Pelosi precedent. Okay.
And what about the Johnson precedent? Because you swore in 2 Republicans the day after their election.
I'm happy to answer. Pelosi precedent. Pat Ryan, Joe Simplinsky. They were elected during an August recess. So 21 days later, when the House returned to regular legislative session, they were administered the oath. That's what we're doing. We're not in session right now. Rep. Grijalva was elected after the House was out of session. As soon as we return to legislative session, as soon as the Democrats decide to turn the lights back on so we can all get back here, I will administer the oath on the first day.
You could swear her in tomorrow, right?
No, not tomorrow. No, we couldn't. We wouldn't. There was an exception for 2 Floridians earlier in this Congress, but the reason was they were duly elected, they had a date set, they flew in all their friends and family, and the House went out of session.
So if she flies in friends and family, then
we don't have a date set. She was elected after.
Okay.
Desde ahí ya se le nota lo incómodo. Sudando, mirando hacia abajo, ¿no? Alguien completamente acorralado. Luego le preguntan, ¿apoyas el perdón de George Santos? Así es, el tipo que robó las tarjetas de crédito de sus propios donantes republicanos, se puso cirugías plásticas y se compró cosas para su casa. Un ladrón literal. Y aún así, MAGA Mike responde con la típica obediencia. Esto se trata de redención. Si Papi Trump dice que está bien, está bien. Escuchen.
President's pardon of George Santos. What do you make of that?
The president has the right under the Constitution for pardon and commutation, of course. We believe in redemption. This is a personal belief of mine, and I hope Mr. Santos makes the most of his second chance.
But how about the fact that the president, in issuing the pardon, or it's clemency, the clemency, he said at least Santos had the courage, conviction, and intelligence to always vote Republican. I looked through this. There have now, I think we have a list of them, 10 former Republican members of Congress who the president has either pardoned or issued clemency for. 10.
Okay, you want to talk about what Joe Biden did with that power?
No, I
want to
pardoned his own
family. The only thing he signed, by the way, with his own pen, everything else is auto pen.
Yeah, but
categories of hardened criminals that they just released from prison. At least President Trump is fully transparent. He goes out and explains his rationale.
Is it okay for him to say that essentially I'm pardoning somebody because they always had the courage?
That's not the reason he pardoned.
Conviction and intelligence to always vote Republican.
That's one snippet of what he said among many things about George Santos.
But should that be a factor in pardoning somebody? That they vote Republican?
I don't think it was.
Clemency?
No, I don't think it was. I just think he's talking about this individual and his past, and at least he's open and transparent about it. Joe Biden never told us anything, and frankly, we're not even sure he knew who he's pardoning on.
Pues bueno, luego remata diciendo que deberíamos estar hablando del Premio Nobel de la Paz para Donald Trump. Nobel de la Paz por Gaza. El supuesto alto al fuego, ¿no? Que ya acaba de colapsar porque Israel siguió bombardeando, más de 30 palestinos han muerto, Hamas retomó el control y ahí tenemos a Netanyahu junto a Smotrich que siguen expandiendo asentamientos. Ninguno de ellos habría apoyado una solución de 2 estados. Y Donald Trump menos. Entonces, ¿de qué paz está hablando Mike? Ni la menor idea.
Historic peace deal that just by sheer force of his personality, President Trump was able to push through. And I think he greatly deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. In fact, Speaker Ohana of the Knesset and I have joined forces to try to collect as many signatures as we can from other speakers and leaders of parliaments around the free world to join us in co-nominating President Trump for the next Nobel Peace Prize. There's no one's more deserving than that.
Y bueno, la cosa no termina ahí porque le preguntan sobre las protestas que vimos de No Kings, esas que Trump y su gente dicen que iban a ser violentas, ¿no? Nada más lejos de la realidad, porque fueron marchas pacíficas. Y por temas importantes encima. Salud, vivienda, la paz. Un pueblo cansado de corrupción y de abuso. Un pueblo que dice no queremos reyes, no queremos dictadores, queremos democracia. Pero claro, MAGA Mike se queja de que su vida sería mucho más fácil si Estados Unidos fuera una monarquía. Una monarquía.
So let's start with the No Kings rallies. You called these Hate America rallies. What do you mean by that?
Well, that collection of folks that I listed were certainly part of it. We congratulate them on a apparently violent free speech exercise. I was a First Amendment lawyer for 20 years. We defend that right. But the irony of the message is pretty clear for everyone. If President Trump was a king, the government would be open right now. If President Trump was a king, they would not have been able to engage in that free speech exercise out on the mall, by the way, which was open because President Trump hasn't closed it. In the last shutdown, 2013 era, President Obama closed the National Mall, it closed all the national parks, didn't allow people to engage in all this. So, I mean, they needed a stunt, they needed a show. Chuck Schumer needs cover right now. He's closed the government down because he needs political cover, and this was a part of it.
Luego el periodista de ABC, que por cierto es Jonathan Carr, le pregunta sobre los ataques a barcos pesqueros en Venezuela y Colombia. Y le dice, ¿de verdad Estados Unidos está cometiendo crímenes de guerra, hundiendo barcos sin juicio y repatriando personas inocentes? Y bueno, pues, Maga Mike, como siempre, se enreda y no sabe qué responder.
We are winning. We are restoring peace through strength. That's one of our core principles.
Don't you have questions for him about Venezuela?
What about
Don't you have questions for him about what's happening in Venezuela? We have this build-up around Venezuela. We have the targeting of these boats. I mean, you must at least have questions about this. I know we have questions.
You have drug cartels bringing in fentanyl in boatloads of it that would kill potentially hundreds of thousands of Americans. What we're doing is restoring...
You have no questions about how they're doing.
No, I believe in peace through strength. I think that the president and the commander-in-chief is in charge of ensuring national security and the safety of the American people. And I think most common-sense Americans look at that and say, thank goodness. You take out one boat full of fentanyl, you save hundreds of thousands of American lives. It was the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 49 during the Biden administration. We are fixing that, and that's why the American people put a strong commander-in-chief back in the office.
All right, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, thanks.
Luego le preguntan, ¿por qué es que Pete Hegseth evita a los periodistas? Y bueno, pues, Maga Mike, en lugar de responder, simplemente dice, rechazo esa premisa.
I just have to ask you what's happened at the Pentagon. Do you have a sense for why the Secretary of Defense seems to be afraid to interact with journalists who cover him?
I mean, reject the premise. There's nothing. There's, the guy, fear is not part of the Secretary of War's makeup.
I mean, the guy's only had 2 briefings since he became Secretary of Defense.
He's very transparent.
And they've basically forced the Pentagon press out of the building unless they would agree to sign a pledge that would make it impossible to be an independent journalist.
I can't remember, and I don't think you can either, a Secretary of Defense who has been so transparent out in the open, talking about priorities, principles.
Oh, I can. I covered the building, and I traveled around the world with Secretaries of Defense. I interviewed them. I questioned them in the briefing room. Other reporters did as well.
But did all those secretaries come out and do public speeches as often as Hegseth does, to be everywhere all the time among the troops?
But I mean, answering questions.
He's restoring.
And of course, you guys haven't brought him up to ask about what's happening in Venezuela.
We're not in session because Chuck Schumer shut the government down, okay? We have a lot of things to do, but I will tell you this about the Secretary of War. We are winning. We are restoring peace through strength.
Luego, en Fox News, vimos cómo Peter Doocy lanza una pregunta absurda. ¿Por qué es más fácil hablar con Hamas que con Hakeem Jeffries? Y Mike responde, gran pregunta. O sea que ni Hamas ni Israel firmaron ningún acuerdo de paz. Donald Trump no logró ningún gran trato. Los demócratas simplemente se niegan a fingir una solución falsa mientras vemos a 20 millones de estadounidenses perdiendo su cobertura médica. Pero Maga Mike al parecer no entiende eso. O simplemente no le importa.
For a lot of people who have been paying close attention all week, President Trump negotiated a big peace deal. At the same time, Democrats and Republicans cannot negotiate an end to this shutdown. It's the 19th day. Why is it that it seems like it is easier to talk to Hamas than Hakeem Jeffries?
It's a great question. Hakeem Jeffries has the same problem that Chuck Schumer has right now. They're both New Yorkers. There is a rise of Marxism in the Democratic Party, and both of them are going to have challengers in their next election. So they have to show a fight. So they picked one on this short gap funding measure, the CR, that Chuck Schumer himself championed just in March, 7 months ago, the same exact thing. The only difference is they're trying to cover their own backsides politically. And it is shameful to us. When people say, why aren't you negotiating with them? Peter, I don't have anything.
Y para cerrar con broche de oro, Donald Trump aparece en el Air Force One, lo entrevistan sobre esta encuesta que les mencioné, que muestra, ¿no?, que el 73% de los estadounidenses quieren mantener el Obamacare. Y bueno, comienza a balbucear algo completamente sin sentido. Escuchen.
A July survey by the Washington Post A July survey by your pollster, Tony Fabrizio, found that 72% of voters across political parties like the ACA tax credits. Are you worried that you might get blamed if you don't help get those through?
Well, we want to have great health care, so we'll do whatever we can do to have great health care. But the Democrats want to destroy all health care because they want to give $1.5 trillion of this money, and they want additional money to go to people that came into our country illegally. Many of them are from prisons and mental institutions, and we're not going to destroy our health care for the Democrats.
Ahí lo tienen, amigos, un fin de semana completo de MAGA Mike Johnson tratando de defender un gobierno que se está cayendo en pedazos. Pánico, mentiras y sumisión total ante el trumpismo. Pues bueno, señores, ahora quiero actualizarles un poco sobre cómo es que va el tema del juicio contra James Comey, ¿no? Pues estamos ante la fecha límite de presentación para las primeras mociones de defensa. Un contexto rápido: James Comey, exdirector del FBI despedido por Trump en el año 2017, actualmente está enfrentando cargos impulsados por un fiscal que fue designado directamente por el propio Trump. La defensa tiene hasta el día de hoy exactamente para presentar las primeras mociones. Y bueno, es obvio que se espera que aleguen algo muy serio, ¿no? Que todo este proceso judicial no es más que una persecución política disfrazada de justicia. Y ojo, que no lo digo solo yo, lo están diciendo los propios expertos en derecho y hasta exfuncionarios del Departamento de Justicia. Escuchemos.
We've got a lot to get to with this great panel. I want to bring in MSNBC Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Dilanian, who's been tracking all of this for us. Also here, MSNBC political analyst and former director of the DOJ's Public Affairs Office, Anthony Coley, is on set with me. And our national security and intel analyst, Michael Feinberg, who recently resigned from the FBI under pressure because of his ties to a Trump critic. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Ken, I'll just start with you really broadly. What are we watching for in today's defense motions?
Good morning, Allie. We expect Comey's lawyers to attack this case on at least two fronts. One, they're going to say that the U.S. Attorney, Lindsay Halligan, is not properly serving in her role because of the Federal Vacancies Act. It's a complicated argument. Essentially, she had a predecessor who was the interim U.S. Attorney who served more than 120 days. And they're going to argue that the clock didn't start again. So the interim U.S. Attorney has exceeded the allowable time under the law, and therefore she's not properly the U.S. Attorney, and therefore the case should go away. The more interesting motion, perhaps, is going to be the way they attack this case on the grounds of selective or vindictive prosecution. And that will just be the opening salvo in that effort, because in order to make that case, they're going to need to get a lot of discovery. They're going to be asking for all the records in this case, all the messages to and from the White House and the U.S. Attorney's Office, all the internal Justice Department communications, to be able to make the case that this prosecution is mainly happening because Donald Trump wants to punish James Comey. Alec.
I want to come back on the discovery front because I think there's potentially some threads there that folks might look ahead to with intrigue. But Anthony, first to you, how do you expect the judge to approach these requests? And honestly, how soon could we get a decision?
Well, prosecution will have about 2 weeks or so to file a response, and then the judge could rule on this by Thanksgiving, give or take. But big picture, Ali, the reason we are in this moment is because of what the president has said, right? Mm-hmm. Presidential words matter. They carry weight. They move markets. And the defense is right to use these words as proof points as to why these charges aren't justified, right? We used to live in a time where presidents didn't comment on criminal matters in the court of public opinion because they were afraid. They respected the court system, and they respected the court of law, right? And that's what's so disturbing about this moment, because we got a president now who doesn't.
But let alone, and I want you to contrast the DOJ that you worked in and this DOJ now. The Merrick Garland Department of Justice, much to the chagrin of some Democrats that I spoke to, really did the work to try to show that they were independent, that they were putting distance between themselves and anything that might be a politically problematic prosecution. That is now out the window and then some. Plus, you've got the president saying, I am the chief law enforcement officer. I mean, as someone who worked at Main Justice,
what is your reaction? That's not normal. Listen, the real contrast is between what Donald Trump is doing right now in Watergate. Today, and you will appreciate this because you're a history buff, today is the 52nd anniversary of the Saturday Night Massacre. That was the moment when President Richard Nixon ordered his Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General to fire the special prosecutor who was investigating the break-in of the DNC at the Watergate complex. Those two individuals, they refused and they resigned. Contrast that to what's happening right now, right? You had career prosecutors in this case who followed the facts and the law. And what the DOJ says, these kind of post-Watergate norms, is you don't bring a case unless there is enough evidence to obtain and sustain a conviction. The Trump-appointed U.S. attorney running that office agreed with the prosecutor. Donald Trump fired that guy, and he put in place Lindsay Halligan, right? And so we're in a moment now that's actually worse than Watergate, in my opinion, because the president is putting people in place who are ignoring the facts, who are working around the law, and are putting people in place to enact his political agenda.
Well, I do think on the Lindsay Halligan thread, it's going to end up being important here, Michael, for a number of reasons. Ken, of course, outlined the way that Comey's own team might try to argue that she was unlawfully appointed. That could have key ripple effects, not just here, but for other acting attorneys as well, right? I'm thinking for New Jersey, for example.
Yeah, and there's actually already been a flurry of litigation in New Jersey by criminal defendants arguing that the indictments or complaints against them are not just facially legally valid because this person acting as U.S. attorney is not there legally. And, you know, it's interesting to note when Ken pointed out that there are a number of potential legal restrictions on Halligan serving as U.S. attorney, one of the primary documents outlining why that is the case is actually a Department of Justice memorandum that was written by none other than now Justice Samuel Alito. So if this does go to the Supreme Court, it's going to be very interesting to see whether the majority, which is usually very inclined to agree with an incredibly expansive use of executive authority by this administration, is willing to submit to the very doctrines it created itself decades ago.
It's a very interesting paradox for us to potentially be driving toward here. As we're considering Lindsay Halligan's role, Ken, it's also important for us to look on the other side in the ways that the Department of Justice itself might try to get Comey's lawyer ousted. Explain the way that they're trying to say that there's a conflict of interest here. And frankly, their argument ignores the fact that Comey himself would get to waive that and obviously has.
Of course, Ellie. Yeah, they're going to argue that Patrick Fitzgerald, James Comey's lawyer, was involved in an episode where Comey wrote memos about his conversations with Donald Trump and disclosed those memos to his lawyers at the time, which included Patrick Fitzgerald. And the FBI later came back and said that some of that material was classified and asked Pat Fitzgerald to give some of it back, which he did. The issue there is we're not talking about marked classified documents. We're talking about information that was in the head of a former top official. He wrote some of it down. That kind of thing happens all the time. There was nothing improper about what happened there. And it's hard to imagine that this is going to be the basis for disqualifying Pat Fitzgerald, especially when, as you rightly pointed out, James Comey can waive that conflict of interest provision.
Michael, sorry, Ken, to cut you off right there at the end. Michael, I want to go back to another thing that Ken said at the beginning of our time together here. And he was talking about the discovery methods that might happen if this case is not dismissed. And again, he detailed the way that...
Ok, amigos, confirmación de exfuncionarios del Departamento de Justicia bajo Donald Trump. Se está usando como un arma política. Si la fiscal que encabezó el caso fue colocada ahí a dedo, de forma irregular, y además existe tanta evidencia, ¿no? Porque se despidió a otros fiscales por no querer seguir la línea del presidente, no querer fabricar pruebas falsas. Bueno, pues eso es cacería política. Esto es exactamente lo que Trump viene haciendo, ¿no? Y no solamente hoy, lo ha hecho en su primer mandato. Tomar instituciones del Estado, convertirlas en herramientas personales para castigar a quienes lo desafían. La diferencia entre el primer mandato y este segundo es que en aquel tiempo él no logró tener todo el poder que hoy tiene. James Comey fue el primero en enfrentarse a él públicamente, recordemos. fue quien reveló los intentos de Trump de interferir en las investigaciones del FBI. ¿Cuál fue su recompensa? Ser despedido, y bueno, años después, ahora ser procesado por la misma persona que Trump colocó a dedo. Lo irónico es que la defensa de Comey ni siquiera está pidiendo favores. Solamente están exigiendo que se cumpla la ley, que esta fiscal tenga legitimidad, que las decisiones judiciales no estén manchadas por venganza política. Pero bueno, al parecer en este contexto eso ya es pedir demasiado. Para colmo, lo que estamos viendo no solo afecta a James Comey. Hemos visto reportes, indican que varios fiscales de carrera, o sea, gente con décadas de servicio, terminan siendo despedidos o hasta presionados simplemente por no querer inventar cargos o forzar casos. Y eso, amigos, nunca había pasado. Bueno, y eso me atrevo a decir ni siquiera durante el Watergate. De hecho, en el clip que les mostré, uno de los analistas lo dice claro, ¿no? Esto es peor que el Watergate. Al menos en aquel entonces, había funcionarios que se negaron a seguir órdenes del presidente. Ahora, en cambio, los que se niegan son reemplazados al instante por personas que sí están dispuestas a obedecer sin cuestionar. Ahí es donde yo creo que está el punto más inquietante, ¿no?, de todo esto. Donald Trump no necesita ganar estos juicios. Le basta con usar el proceso como un castigo, hacer que sus enemigos gasten millones y millones en abogados, que su reputación quede en duda y que cualquiera dentro del gobierno que piense en desobedecerlo, bueno, pues va a tener que pensarlo dos veces. Esa es la nueva estrategia del trumpismo, la intimidación judicial. Así que sí, amigos, la fecha límite para las mociones de defensa de Comey es importante. Seguramente ya tendremos información exacta hasta el día de mañana. Pero lo que realmente se está definiendo, ¿no?, es si todavía existe un sistema judicial que sea independiente en Estados Unidos. O si ya todo pasó a ser parte del brazo del poder político, ¿no? Pero bueno, amigos, ¿qué opinan ustedes? ¿Creen que este caso contra James Comey tiene algún fundamento real? ¿O es lo que todos sospechamos? ¿Pura persecución política? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme en este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete al canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.